Hi, I'm going to read from my book Aspecting the Goddess, some of the Blodeuwedd story. Blodeuwedd. She is the wild one, the woman made of petals, of flowers, conjured from sunlight and summer, from softness, scent and colour. The woman bees will flock to, butterflies worship. She who opens at dawn and glories all a long day, and then closes, replete, at night. Blodeuwedd. You of the nearly unpronounceable in English, difficult to write name. That name that sounds like a whisper across the slope of a mountain or an echo carried down a stream. A name that might be a breath of invitation deep in the forest. Blodeuwedd, Blodeuwedd. Made by magic into womanhood, with no childhood to teach you, no mother to turn to or blaze forth from, no sisters to hold and dance with. Blodeuwedd, one of a kind, a woman from magic and flowers, desire made flesh. Perhaps Blodeuwedd is also a child of Arianrod's, one way and another, a child of the goddess, born straight from the earth, not through a mortal woman. How far apart is a flower from a woman? How far apart a river, a tree, a bird? Infinitely far, perhaps not very far. Within our essence, all these things reside. Rivers and birds and flowers and trees, memories of what our atoms once belonged to, forms of this world that predate our form. When we turn there for solace, to moonlight, the tides of the sea, to the bright flowers of summer, the golden wheat, the call of an owl at night, don't we feel as if we were a part of it? And it's easier to join that beating heart of the world than it is to reach out to or understand another human being. Child of earth, of the goddess, we are all that. Humans and deer, oak trees and mountain streams, flowers and mountains. All comes from her. All leads back to her. Mountain, ages old, the bones of the earth thrust up from seabed or burst by volcanoes as the great plates of the earth grind against each other, or else left standing after glaciers churn their way through the landscape, relentless, but in the end taking the easiest path and leaving the stubbornest points of the landscape alone. She is there, a foretaste of her in the molten fire that burns everything in its path, only later, aeons later, relaxing into rich soil, rewarding those paths of flame with lush forest, fertile fields, undulant, green, growing life, all dedicated to her. She is there, in the take-no-prisoners glaciers, the thoughtless ice queenness of them, rolling everything in their path relentlessly into the destruction that bites out mountains and valleys and lakes. She is there, in the sharp black rocks at the peaks, the rounded boulders gentled by wear. She is there, in the streams carving into her hillsides, still shaping her. She is there in the mists and clouds that veil her, or the icy lake where she might bathe, changed and changing. She is in the forest that clads the slopes like her green cloak. She is there in elder, ash, in oak and thorn, in beech and rowan, hazel, willow, yew. She is in the trunk and branch and root of them, clinging to rocky hillsides, or dwelling deep and lush among their kind in the valleys and softer hills. She is there, exposed to bone in winter, showing their skeletons, and she is there in the spring green that kisses their limbs. She is there in the bud and flower and feathering through to seed. Oh, She is there. Flower might be part of the process that we name beautiful. Flower of the field or garden or hedge, but flower is one piece only of a whole story. One moment of colour, brightness and scent from a whole year long, seasons long, millennial old story. The story of flowers. A story older than that of humans, certainly. Older than mammals, than birds. A story so old that were we to consider it truly, we would cower, afraid beneath its magnitude, the severe, utter beauty of it. It's a story of otherness, that some small part of it pleases the human eye, is incidental. Flowers were born from the green to please wind and bee, to worship the earth. Bearers of the ancient life force, they dance the dance of gods who existed long before we came to gaze upon them. Memories of the great forest remain. We think of forests as contained places, discrete areas of green on the map. This was not contained. This was not mappable. It stretched across Europe. For a long time, the laws of that forest were the rules containing human realms. The laws of oak and beech, of ash and rowan. The laws of leaf and stem, of root and branch and trunk, of soil, of water, of sun. The cycle of bud and flower and fruit and cold interval. This was vast, unyielding, and the very fabric of the land. Villagers fought to keep the forest back. Those who lived at the edges of the village were distrusted. Too close to the forest, they were thought to be influenced by its magics. Strangers who emerged from the forest were suspect. It was hard to be certain they were properly human, let alone when they spoke or dressed oddly or talked of unfamiliar places. Later, when towns were built, they focused into the centre, away from the edges. Windows gave view onto civilization, not onto the wild, which was considered ugly, frightening. Those who made their living in or from the forest, herb women, woodsmen, hunters, were considered not quite civilized. In Blodeuwedd's story, two people, one with great powers and one with bare, aching need, seek to control this force, to dip a handful of it up out of the stream of creation and shape it with their wills to human ends, to make a woman from flowers, to turn this great green engine of our world towards domestic love and loyalty, to ask wild, fertile beauty to serve another cause. We might be surprised that it worked, even for a minute, that a woman of flowers was born of magic, did momentarily take that form and glimmer there, as if to promise something she could not fulfill, was not ever designed to meet or understand. Even though it's a story, perhaps we can see where that imagining came from, the corresponding beauty of flowers and a woman's form, the softness of her, the secret centre of her. Perhaps we can sympathise, even yearn ourselves for a glimpse of that magic. But she had forces inside her not tied in blood to lines of women, to the getting of children and caring for humans. Her offerings were sap and summer, pollen and petal, and as she wielded them, and she couldn't not wield them, she was made of them. They composed her. She attracted not just her given husband, though none had asked her if she wished for a husband, but anyone else who saw her, who smelled her like a flower. She had been forged in magic, and so it swirled around her. It was in the tresses of her hair and her breath and the touch of her fingers, the gaze of her eyes, and anyone caught in it drowned a little, like bees. That magic, old and imperative, called them into the centre. No argument compelled them and welcomed them. And perhaps those ones knew her a little. better than Hlu, who believed in tricks and visions, unmothered, half-formed Hlu. Take a tree, take a flower, take a bird, a breath of air with the words whispered through it, incantations. Take the magic of stardust and reshape it just as we are shaped, again and again through millennia, to just this shape and this moment. Take will and bind it with magic, with the processes of nature, and see through it sideways, like through water. A pool or a waterfall, maybe. Let the twist of water become her hair, the petals, her soft skin, the roots of the tree, her nourishment from the earth, and the bird, her knowledge of divine. Let her be birthed on the side of a mountain, a Welsh one, why not? From the yearnings and devisings of two men, one young and hopeful, and one old with knowledge, but neither of them wise. And let them stand for all men and the great yearning for union, now that they have lost the goddess, spurned her without seeing the truth laid out before them. Let a woman rise up from flowers, from desire and need, like summer comes from spring, and let us forget for a moment that autumn follows, and winter, and let this woman be as women are, as flowers are, turning towards the sun, opening their petals, and offering their pollen to who comes in the great, pulsing, thrusting, generous need for the brush of wings against stamens, for the caress of wind among petals, to carry golden drifts out and beyond, the random decree of plants and the blessings they scatter to the winds. Oh, it was bound to end badly, this story of creating a woman from flowers. Did they think at all about what flowers do, about what flowers are, the sex organs of primitive, unapologetic nature, before all that refinement of the animal kingdom, let alone the packness, the tribeness, the social rules that humans broker, trading some of that primitive for other, so-called higher needs of civilization and security and social order. Gwydion, the great magician, with Hlu, his rescued nephew. Was this his attempt to bring forth life, to do what a woman could and he could not, provide for his sister's son? She's called a woman of flowers, but surely she's really the goddess of flowers. She's the power and essence of flowers. She is flower. So then the story makes complete sense. He tried to marry the flowers, and of course they are not faithful. Murdered by his rival and his wife, his was the blood and bone they took to nurture them through the deep winter. So come spring, they could rise again in their glory. Love of the goddess, marrying the goddess, has always meant death to a mortal man. Death in the ways of sacred death. And his was a sacred death. And death in the ordinary way, as humans fade and die, while goddesses, flowers and trees, and all of nature shifts, changes, and continues on. What he sought to do through the magic of Gwydion, what they had always sought to do, though Hlu unknowing in it, was to tame and fetter the goddess. It's a story, the Blodeuwedd story, part of the Blodeuwedd story from my book, Aspecting the Goddess.